Hey everybody, this is Candace from the Hot Bohemian, and today I wanted to show you how I make a double shank ring. There are a couple of ways that I do it, but to make a strong band, I start off with 2 pieces of sterling wire the same length. Okay, so I cut these at 62 millimeters, which is going to equal a size 8 ring. And what I'm working with today are a couple of bezels that I cut. I saw these little pieces here and then hand etched this. So I'm actually going to put this piece of turquoise in here. And since it's a larger piece, I'm going to put a double shank on it. I'm actually working with this other piece too that I created. Just has some hand etching, and I'm putting this piece of turquoise in here. Again, this is a rather large bezel cup right here, so I think a double shank band would fit this piece nicely. So first thing, you start off with 2 pieces of sterling or whatever type of wire you're working with. Make sure they're cut to the same length, and then I'm going to go ahead and wrap these around my ring mandrel so I can get the shape of the ring. So I have my ring mandrel here. This is a heavy duty stainless steel one that's not going to mar your metal up when you're working with it. So I'm just going to take my sterling silver wire and bend it around like so until I get kind of the shape of the ring that I'm looking for. You can use a mallet to aid. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is repeat this step for all 4 of my pieces of sterling. So I'm using 4 pieces of sterling because, again, I'm making two ring shanks for the 2 pieces, the 2 rings that I decided to make. So we're gonna continue this for all 4 of them. I have my ring shanks right here that I'm going to solder and make them into regular rings. And the reason why I do this is because I can get a true to size fit. So there's another way you can do it, is if you have it open, and then you don't have to solder each ring individually, but then you're like kind of guessing with the size. So I want these to be specific sizes, so I made them, cut them to their true size. And so the next part, I'm going to solder the joints, and then we eventually are going to solder these together. So I'm going to get ready to prep these to solder. So I have all 4 of my rings here. They each have a piece of solder on them, and I'm going to take my micro torch, because this is not a large soldering job, and I'm going to just heat them up and melt that solder down. I'm then going to quench the rings, and we will move on to the next step after that. All of my rings here are soldered. They are not very pretty because I haven't pickled them yet. I'm just gonna save that till I solder these together. So the next step is to take your ring mandrel, go ahead and put it on and hammer till you get to the shape of the ring. And the important part here is when you're doing this is your 2 pieces that are gonna go together. You want to make sure they are exactly the same size. I know I made one a size 7 and the other a size 8. So you just want to make sure they're gonna match up perfectly for this part. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll see how they all turn out. So the rings here are now shaped into a circle, but you also want to make sure that when you are lining these up, there's not any gaps, because you want them to sit totally flat against each other. So as you can see here, You know, one of these rings probably has a little bit of a wave in it. It is not even. There's a little gap here. So what you can do is set it on a steel block and take a hammer and just flatten it out. So I'm going to do that with this pair, and I'm also going to do that with this pair, so you can see there's a gap here. So you don't want any gaps because it's going to be easier when we set the solder on these for it to stay in and bind together. So what I'm going to do now is set these up to solder. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to place a piece of solder right on the inside of the ring here. And so you can line these up however you want. I'm going to line up my 2 solder joints, and I'm going to solder opposite of that. Essentially I'm going to put the solder joints on the back plate of the ring. Here it is. So I'm going to put the solder joints here when I'm going to solder it onto the ring. They're going to be facing down on this back plate of the bezel. Okay, so here's the tricky part. You need to get these to line up. I mean, there's a trick where you can purchase binding wire. I have not used that yet. So what I'm going to do is make sure these are, you know, both even together, and then I'm going to use a pair of tweezers here, self-locking, and then just kind of make sure both of these are touching on the bottom, set it up, and then solder. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up, and then all I'm going to do essentially is put a piece of solder down here, heat it up, make sure it melts. And you only want a tiny bit in one area down here. Okay, these are straight out the pickle. And I don't know if I mentioned, but I use medium solder when I'm soldering these bands together. So, nice and clean. Both rings are soldered together. Now what we're going to do, now is take a butter knife or any other thin tool that you may have and find the opening and then put the butter knife through and just kind of wedge it on open. And then you can make it as wide as you'd like. And so this bottom part here is soldered, not coming apart. And then what I'm gonna do at the end here, once these are both finished, is I'm going to file down this side a little bit so it's flat, and then I'm going to set it on my band. And I'm going to solder, so essentially it's going to look like that. And then so you have a nice double shank ring that's going to be more secure on your back plate because it's going to be soldered in more than one spot. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial on how to make a simple double shank band. If you have any questions or comments, you can provide them down below. And if you found this useful, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.